Okay, well, look, just in the last 12 to 24 hours, Israel has bombed the entrance gate of Iran's notorious Evin prison, which holds political prisoners and dual nationals. What kind of message does this send? What are the consequences or likely consequences of this in Iran?
Well, this is a notorious prison. This is exactly the prison that the Iranian regime held their political opponents. I mean, the women who are out there protesting in the streets, refusing to wear the hijab, people like that. Those are exactly the kind of people who are held in this prison. So, look, whether it's this, whether it's Israel bombing the Iranian state media facility, the organ of the regime, trying to reach the Iranian people there. I mean, Israel has clearly shown that they're not messing around there. But again, at least as of now, the mullahs by and large remain in power there. So they're stopping short of an attempt at a full-on regime change there. But they are, in this particular case, seeming to aid and abet the jailbreak of many people who've been wrongfully detained by one of the most despicable regimes on the face of the earth there. And I interpret that, Gabriella, as one of many ways to try to lend soft support to the Iranian people there, because the people, frankly, that are going to be escaping from this prison now that it has been bombed by the Israelis, the people that are escaping there are exactly the kind of people that, using things like Elon Musk's Starlink, and they'll start communicating there. Maybe they can get arms from a source too. These are exactly the kind of people that you would like to think, indeed you would perhaps even like to pray, that might be willing to ultimately put their lives on the line to try to decapitate this most evil of regimes.
Looking at Iran's options, rather, there has been reported the threat of sleeper cells. Border Protection reports that the threat of sleeper cells in the US has never been higher. Tom Homan spoke about this.
Well, look, you and I have talked about this many times. I said the last 4 years, my biggest concern was this open border was the biggest national security vulnerability this country's ever seen. So I pulled numbers this morning just from a CBP under Joe Biden. There was 1,272 nationals of Iran released in the country between OFO and the Border Patrol. And you compare that to the Trump administration, zero. Right, zero releases. And right now, because of President Trump's leadership, we have the most secure border in my lifetime, most secure border in the history of this nation. So we have a secure border. That was President Trump's big win on securing this nation. So we're not releasing people in this country. Special interest aliens aren't crossing that border undetected. But under Joe Biden, we had over 10 million people cross that border. But my biggest concern from day one, beyond the fentanyl, beyond the sex trafficking women and children, were the 2 million known gotaways. Over 2 million people crossed that border. We don't know who they are, where they came from.
Josh, how concerned are you about this?
Well, Tom Homan's exactly right. I mean, literally every word that he just said strikes me as emphatically correct. Gabrielle, we can actually go back quite a bit further. So after 9/11 happened in the early 2000s here in the United States, there was a thing called the 9/11 Commission, which is exactly what it sounds like. They had a lot of senators, diplomats, high-ranking officials formulate an extensive conclusion, a summary as to what happened and why it happened. And one of the most famous conclusions of the 9/11 Commission, which came out in 04, 05, around then, was they said that it is axiomatic, it is self-evident that terrorists cannot commit harm within the United States if they don't come into the United States in the first instance. 9/11, in fact, most of the hijackers who flew those planes into the Twin Towers, the Pentagon, and so forth there, they were actually here on expired visas. So, illegal immigration, a part of it are these gotaways that Tom Homan's talking about. A lot of it, though, are just expired visas. But all of the above contributes to a national security environment where we have no idea who is currently in the country there. We have no idea who is currently here. And Iran and Hezbollah and their various proxies have had sleeper cells going on for decades now. This is not a particularly new thing. Rather, the difference is that we just have less of an idea as to how many of them are here in the United States and where they are. It's not good. It's a very legitimate concern there. It's something that I've been thinking about for a very long time there. Having said that, Gabriella, the possible threat of that is not something certainly that can dissuade you or disincentivize you from taking affirmative action overseas that is manifestly in the national interest. So I've seen some people on social media saying that, oh, the threat of sleeper cells is so great that the United States should never have done this to Fordo and Natanz, the Iranian nuclear facilities. I profoundly disagree with that. You have to do what is best in the national interest there and then trust that law enforcement, the FBI, CIA, and so forth will take care of what's happening here on the home front there. But nonetheless, it is very much a real concern, no doubt about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Some Democrats are furious that Donald Trump took out Iran's nuclear threat. AOC and others have called for Donald Trump to be impeached for launching the strike on Iran without congressional approval, which is just so embarrassing for them. But Also, while many have been celebrating and thanking Donald Trump for having the courage to do this, others have been taken to the streets in cities around the world protesting Free Palestine and denouncing the bombing of Iran's nuclear sites. You know, are you surprised? What's your reaction to this kind of response?
Gabriella, I think that probably a majority of Democrats are actually genuinely hoping for a nuclear-armed Iran. I genuinely believe to this day that Barack Obama and his entire administration actually wanted Iran to be nuclear. And I'll tell you exactly why they think this. It's straight out of the left-wing academy. I mean, it is pseudo-academic claptrap, the likes of which I could barely even attempt to think of on my own. But the going theory is essentially this. They think that in the Middle East, Israel and the non-Islamist Arab states, namely Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, and so forth there, the logic is that those states, Egypt, Jordan, are just too powerful. And because they're too powerful, that is why you have these other countries like Iran, Turkey, Assad in Syria back when he was there. The logic is that is why they're launching. That's why they're latching out. So if you take that to its next step, then it would follow that you actually want Iran to get a nuclear weapon to check the nuclear power of the Israeli, Saudi, Emirati axis there. And therefore, these people say that they'll kind of just balance each other out and there'll be grand peace in the region. I mean, it's absurd. It's risible. It's frankly kindergartner logic. It's the kind of thing that you would expect, you know, a drunk 19-year-old university freshman who was high on his supply from some toxic combination of various narcotics to kind of come up with at 3 a.m. in the college dorm room. I mean, it's just low IQ, midwit stuff, for lack of a better explanation there. But I think they actually genuinely believe it. So that probably above all is why people like AOC are lashing out. This is obviously not an impeachable offense. It is nonsense. The commander-in-chief under Article 2 of the Constitution absolutely unequivocally has the inherent constitutional authority to launch in prophylactic defensive strikes like this to protect the American people against an imminent threat. There's no doubt about that in constitutional law here in the U.S. whatsoever there. But they're coming from a starting place where they genuinely actually do want Iran to get a nuclear weapon, which really says, frankly, a heck of a lot about their moral priorities, I would say.
Josh Hammer, Senior Editor at Large of Newsweek, thank you so much for making the time to speak to us on Power Hour. Really appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you.